But first, sometimes you wonder if what you read is a mistake, and then you're staggered that it isn't. Today, an exclusive story in The Australian that one of the country's worst serial sex offenders, Wayne Wilmont, who was involved in the brutal 1980s abduction, rape and murder of 20-year-old Janine Balding, will be let out of prison with the support of an expensive NDIS package. Wilmont was sentenced to 8 years over the rape and abduction of Balding, only then to be released on parole, where he went on to commit several serious violent crimes and sexual attacks on women and men. Now, beyond questions about the appropriateness of taxpayer money being used to support Wilmont, there are grave concerns about the safety of any NDIS worker in contact with this convicted predator. A forensic psychologist told the court that the most likely risk scenario for Wilmont was, and I quote, most likely to involve a penetrative sexual attack on a young woman previously unknown to him. Now, this isn't an isolated case. We've also learned today in the Sydney Morning Herald that the NDIS has a growing role in supervising and supporting sex offenders, some of whom are on packages worth over $1 million. Joining me now to discuss the long-term prognosis for the NDIS is former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson. Well, John, I don't think the NDIS was first envisioned by anyone thinking it would be used to pay for and supervise violent sex offenders and pedophiles.
Peter, I must begin by saying that I think we all recognise that there are Australians who really do need support, and you and I both know, and all of our listeners will know, that there are carers too who do an incredible job and need our support. But I think the point I'd want to go to first here is that you and I both have been involved in public policy. Badly thought out public policy truly bites the community in serious ways. So from that era, when Prime Minister Gillard was throwing vast amounts of money at education and vast amounts of money at the NDIS, the reality is that neither were well enough designed to deliver anything like value for the taxpayer. The education revolution, as it was known, has seen us roughly double, I think, expenditure on education for worse outcomes. The NDIS, from day one, there were hard heads everywhere warning that it was poorly designed, that it would encourage rent seekers, that it wasn't effective in screening out those who would want to rort it. The Australian Investigative Commission, I can't remember its full name, last year, that found that somewhere between 15 and 20% of NDIS revenues are being misallocated, if you like. The system is being rorted. The fact that we're now spending more on it than we are on defence and more than we are on Medicare. The states have successfully washed their hands and cost shifted. And I think I'm right in saying the Australian Financial Review estimates that by the middle of the 2030s, this might be costing us $125 billion a year. This is extraordinary stuff. And then we discover it's being used as a sort of de facto penalty system as well.
And I guess the problem for Bill Shorten here, and I'll be sympathetic to Bill Shorten, although he was there when it was poorly designed at the outset with Julia Gillard, was that he has now taken this as an issue to the states. He's written to them, it's reported this afternoon, saying you cannot turn it into a dumping ground for released criminals. The problem is, and you alluded to it then, when it was established, Gillard had her back to the wall politically. Kevin Rudd was coming after her. Of course, he eventually got her. But she was trying to do deals to get big policies like the NDIS over the line and hope it might protect her from Rudd's coming back. And one of the things she did with the NDIS was it's not run like a normal government department, so people don't front estimates. Departments aren't accountable in that way. They've got free call on the Treasurer for whatever funds they need. It's uncapped. So someone could have a package that's worth $2 million. It could be worth $10 million. That's just in the gift to whoever is the assessor. But also, if there are any changes to the design of the scheme, like Shorten's saying now, we don't want prisoners and pedophiles and others to be able to access the scheme, all the states have to come together and agree. Now, we can see with the Commission in relation to the GST, I mean, that just doesn't happen. So unfortunately, I think we've got a bugger's muddle here. I think we have got really badly designed policy with basically an open checkbook on the taxpayer.
Well, I entirely agree. And Peter, it's not as if there were not hard-headed people who understand how government policy and how economics work and how really governments actually can run businesses that were not warning at the time that it was badly designed and that it would attract the rent seekers, I mentioned a moment ago, and blow out hopelessly in cost. It's exactly what's happened. What should we take out of it? Well, there's a lot of things we should take out of it, but public policy matters, and public policy can only be put in place if you have coherent government, properly led. So part of the plea has to be for leadership in the future, because this thing's growing at over 10% a year. I understand that 11% of our boys now are on NDIS programs. The most extraordinary things are funded. There are anecdotal stories everywhere of outrageous abuses. Now we learn about sexual predators effectively, if you like, I suppose you could say the state's passing the cost of imprisonment of people who should frankly not be out in the community over to the Commonwealth. Well, that's ingenious for their books, but it's very, very bad policy for the rest of it, at a time when I think young women particularly must wonder what on earth they might be exposed to in terms of the federal government allowing inappropriate people to go loose in the community.
A lot of people contact me, John. They watched the launch last year of ARC, Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, the big conference in London. I was there in London. You're on the board of ARC. You were heavily involved. You're one of the key speakers on the stage. And they watched it retailed around the world, and they said for the first time in a long time, they had some hope that we could turn the tide. Now, I felt that hope myself. I felt a sense coming out of ARC that we don't have to accept in the West that our best years are behind us. A lot of people ask me, what happens next for ARC? Where are we going from here, John? Is there anything you can tell us?
Yes, I can. I can tell you that it was a great success. There's great demand everywhere, including in Australia, for us to continue to address the great issues confronting us. There will be, the next ARC will be held in London, major ARC event, the mother lode, if you like, in London in February next year. Many more people. We've got a much bigger hall. We'll be exploring the same broad themes, energy and the environment, social fabric and family, our story, and business and prosperity. But where there will be an Australian chapter. It's under construction at the moment. There's a lot of hard work, but there will be an Australian, and we will seek to have the same, if you like, part of our annual event in this country, cultural heritage, if you like, or scenery, high quality events looking closely at those four themes in the sense of examining how they're playing out in Australia. We want to use good thinking to unpack why things are going wrong and expose the bad thinking that always stands behind problems and point to better thinking as much as anything else for today's leaders and tomorrow's leaders.
Well, more strength to your arm, John Anderson. Thank you for your time.